given the fact that the United States currently has armed men and women serving all around the world, and we can have an academic conversation about whether people in Jordan, Syria, whether they should be called home. The fact is, when you are having people there salute the flag and serve your country and defend our way of life, you have to defend them. There is literally no other way out. So I think it would be irresponsible for the United States Armed Forces to start sending tanks into Iran to start bombing Tehran. That's not what I'm calling for. I do not want to see that. But you have to strike these militias.
3 Americans were killed by Iranian-backed militia. It's a staggering thing to say. Young men killed by our enemies. Give us, for people who haven't really understood or heard about this, tell us exactly what happened, who are the people that killed these Americans.
So it is a terrible story, Eric. I wish we were talking for the first time under happier circumstances, but alas, that is what it is. I mean, this is the Biden administration. This is the Biden foreign policy. This tragically is their legacy. So since October 7th, since the Hamas pogrom, the Hamas Holocaust, where you had up to 1,400 slain there in southern Israel, Iran-backed militias have been firing indiscriminately at U.S. bases across the Middle East, particularly in Syria and Iraq. Last I checked, that number has been estimated now to be around 150 separate attacks. Now, that is actually not even including, Eric, all of the nonsense involving the Iran-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen, which is a whole separate issue pertaining to the piracy and the commandeering of commercial ships there, and the fact that these thugs, these literal slave-owning Islamist thugs, have essentially shut down one of the most important waterways for global commerce. Holding all that aside, there have been 150 different attacks in Syria and Iraq. And unfortunately, Eric, it was only a matter of time. It was only a matter of time, absent some sort of heavy-handed deterrent response, which this administration has been woefully loath to do. Short of that, it was only a matter of time until there were actual casualties. It actually was just over a month ago. It was in late December around Christmas, where there was another attack on a U.S. base, and a U.S. Army soldier was left in a coma. In fact, he actually just woke up from that coma within the past week or so. So there have been very other close life-endangering calls, and now you have an Iran-backed militia operating in northern Iraq, roughly affiliated with a Shiite extremist group called Kataib Hezbollah. No direct relation to Hezbollah in Lebanon, but they're all related. They're all part of the same Iranian network of terrorist proxy groups. And like you said, you have tragically 3 dead Americans, at least 34 more injured. This is a U.S. Army base in the far northeast extreme corner of the country of Jordan. It is a strategic base because it's very close to both Iraq and Syria. It was very useful for the Trump administration when they were prosecuting their war against ISIS. And it looks like Iran has struck a very dangerous and indeed lethal blow to that.
So what is the point? In other words, is Iran trying to goad us into a war? I mean, that's my guess, that they are evil. They're satanically inspired maniacs, and they don't want peace. They don't want peace in Israel. They want war. They are kind of like end time proponents of, Armageddon. Let's bring it on. That seems to me their foreign policy. What am I missing?
I don't think you're missing much. There is this conceit by some in the foreign policy community that Iran can be treated as a rational actor on the world stage. This is kind of getting back to the idea of mutually assured destruction versus the Soviet Union back during the Cold War. The Soviets were atheists. They were not fanatical Islamists, and the mainstream of U.S. foreign policy at that time thought that you could trust the Kremlin to engage in some sort of sober analytical game theory that would prevent.
Of course, they don't think that they're going to go to be greeted by 70 virgins. At the Kremlin, they were at least rational, but we are dealing with really religious fanatics, and I'm just going to cut to the chase, satanically inspired religious fanatics, evil, cruel, slave-owning, wicked people. And so they, in a sense, have nothing to lose. They want to die. And so when you're dealing with them, if you're the Biden administration, which is naive would be the really sweet term, you don't understand what you're dealing with. But then, of course, we've got hawks like Lindsey Graham, who I think that they would enjoy World War III almost as much as the mullahs. So where do you think this goes?
Yeah, so Eric, I totally agree with you. I mean, the U.S. has been essentially at war with Iran since the Islamic Revolution in 1979. We don't call it a war, but we've essentially been at war with them. I mean, from the Beirut barracks in Lebanon in the 1980s to the bombing in Argentina and Buenos Aires in the 1990s. Iran was involved with 9/11, as has been shown time and time again. Now we see what's happening in the Red Sea, the army. We have been in a perpetual state of conflict with Iran for 45 years now. It hasn't exploded into a direct, U.S. Air Force dropping bombs inside of Iran place, but we have been at war with this horrific, fanatical Islamist regime. Now, as far as what the Biden administration can do from here, I also don't want to see World War III. I do not support Congress declaring war against Iran tomorrow. I saw the tweet from Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham has never seen a foreign conflict that he doesn't like. He has never seen a foreign country that he doesn't think the United States military should be used as some sort of United Nations peacekeeping brigade to try to spread Madisonian or Jeffersonian democracy. I mean, people should have been sobered by the lessons of Afghanistan and Iraq. Having said that, Eric, at the same time, given the fact that the United States currently has armed men and women serving all around the world, and we can have an academic conversation about whether people in Jordan, Syria, whether they should be called home. The fact is, when you are having people there salute the flag and serve your country and defend our way of life, you have to defend them. There is literally no other way out. So I think it would be irresponsible for the United States Armed Forces to start sending tanks into Iran to start bombing Tehran. That's not what I'm calling for. I do not want to see that. But you have to strike these militias. You have to strike Hezbollah. You have to strike the Houthi rebels. You have to at least strike all the various tentacles of the Iranian sphere of Islamist fanatical influence. You can stop short of actual military action inside Iran's borders, but there is a lot short of that you can do.
Well, I mean, it is fascinating to me because this is what projecting weakness does. And this is why we have to get Trump back in the White House, because if you do not have that deterrence up front, if you don't have a Reagan or a Trump projecting strength, you invite this stuff. And then once this happens, then you're already behind the 8 ball and you've got to figure out, okay, now we've got to do something, but what do we do? What's too much? And we'd rather not be here. And so to me, that's what's so fascinating is that you have a kind of we're seeing played out this year, an election year, what is a result of Biden. I always say Biden, quote unquote, because I don't know who is behind the puppet that is Joe Biden, the husk, the corpse of the living dead, this guy, Joe Biden. We all know he's not doing this, we know that there's a team around him of competent, wicked people. He's incompetent and wicked, different kind of wickedness. But this is basically where we find ourselves under Obama and now under Biden. I mean, that to me is really the issue here, is that we're dealing here in Ukraine, potentially in Taiwan. We are dealing with projecting American weakness, projecting confusion, and inviting our enemies, and obviously anywhere else on our southern border as well.
Yeah, and there's a huge distinction to be drawn. I agree with everything you said, but there's a huge distinction to be drawn between prudently projecting strength and therefore deterring your enemies versus trying to democratize countries and civilizations and cultures that will never be democratized. So for instance, there's a huge difference between strategically placing aircraft carriers in the Red Sea and around there to prevent these fanatical slave-holding thugs like the Houthis from doing XYZ things versus trying to start up a new democratic legislature in Kabul, Afghanistan for 20 years. So those are not the same thing.
Okay, so we have to, yes, I want to be clear so my audience is tracking. There are people, neocons, George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Lynn Cheney, Lindsey Graham, down the line. These people are not about prudentially projecting American strength to prevent World War III. They seem to naively believe that, if women in hijabs and burqas have purple on the end of their finger, democracy has sprouted in Afghanistan. They don't seem to understand the way. They don't seem to understand the founders' vision of what it is to have a republic and to have that kind of stuff. So they have this foolish idea, which Bush said in his second inaugural, I'll never forget it, that we seem to be able to very easily spread quote-unquote democracy around the globe. But it's democracy light. It's not actual democracy. It's a foolish it's a foolish way of, in a sense, being at war with everyone around the world, because you seem to naively believe that you can spread American style. I mean, let me be clear, because we're going to go to break. We want to spread genuine American style democracy around the world. We want people to have the freedoms that we do, but we have to be prudent. We have to be wise about what that actually takes. And the neocons seem to be naive about it. Anyway, we'll be right back. We're talking to Josh Hammer. Folks, I hate to interrupt, but I just don't want you to miss any of the content we're putting out on here. We've just got some amazing stuff. So would you do yourself a favor and hit the subscribe button so we can make sure you don't miss anything? I promise you, great stuff coming up. Hit the subscribe button. Thank you. What is it about the Obama mindset? And I say Obama because I get the people behind Biden are Obama's people. What is it about their mindset that they give your average American, your patriotic American, the impression that they're pro-Iran somehow? It goes past wanting to play nice with evil. It seems like somehow they want to see America weakened. I can't help but get that impression.
Yeah, I don't think it's just an impression. I think that is emphatically accurate. I mean, you heard Barack Obama on the campaign stump back in 2008, back in 2012. He was saying how America was not exceptional, how American exceptionalism is kind of this old fogey thing that we tell our children is not true. We all remember about Jeremiah Wright and what he said in that infamous church and things like that there. So, this is a man who is steeped in anti-American, anti-Western ideology. And in many ways, he is a creature of a very far left academy, a higher education edifice that loathes Western civilization, that believes that Western civilization, of which America is, of course, the most shining example, they believe that it is just one big experiment, not in ordered liberty, as the founding fathers would have said it, but instead they would say that it is one big experiment in colonialism and oppression and racism and all this stuff that we have seen metastasize in recent years in the form of the Black Lives Matter Antifa riots in 2020, the current wokeism. I mean, all these things ultimately do relate to one another. Frankly, Eric, I actually think that the current situation of the southern border in Texas also relates to this as well. I think that Secretary Mayorkas and President Biden, or again, whoever is actually calling the shots for Joe Biden, because he's merely the puppet at this point, they are operating under the exact same mentality there, where they're trying to open the borders as a way, I think, at least to expiate their sins, to atone for America's sins, because America is too rich, it's too white, it's too much of a colonialist, it's this, that. So I think that the grand flirtation with the Iranian regime, which by any account is one of the two most evil regimes on the planet, along with North Korea, those are probably the top two. It's a sordid way of thinking about it, but those probably are the top two. I think that there's no other way of thinking about trying to embolden Iran and harm our allies in the region other than evil. I have long said that the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal, was not an act of rational policy where they simply miscalculated. I actually do think that it was an act of willful evil. Now, not every policy is like that. You can disagree on tax cuts, whatever, but at a certain point, I fully agree with you that it does cross the thresholds from just being naive to actually being evil. And there's no other way to view this level of multiple administration Democratic Party capitulations to the Iranian regime other than evil.
Well, it's interesting to me because this is where, to my mind, the only explanation is a spiritual one, where you're talking about evil. You're not talking about different views. You're not talking about different tax rates. You're talking about actual evil. And how does evil operate? Again, it's not an abstract thing. There is something about, you just mentioned, sort of this American guilt, expiation for American guilt. The devil, and folks, if you don't believe the devil exists, let me simply say, unfortunately, he does. We can talk about that another time. But playing off of people's misplaced guilt is classic, because people feel like, oh, I'm a good person. I feel guilty about being American or white or male or whatever it is. They feel like somehow that's good. I'm here to tell you it's actually bad. And the devil, the forces of evil, whatever you need to tell yourself so that you can feel sophisticated, plays on that. So it's a mixture of many things. What's happening at the southern border, what happens in Iran, part of it is playing off of the misplaced guilt of Westerners, Americans, whatever it is. Then, of course, you have really, really cynical stuff. I mean, the idea that, somebody's making money off of these deals. For the neocons, they love, to grease the skids of the war machine. There's money in it for them. There's money in it for Nikki Haley. So for her, it's not, American guilt. It's money, the illusion that we're projecting American strength when it's kind of a foolish way of projecting strength that's going to invite greater trouble. So it's really like a devil's brew, Josh, of many different factors. And I think that's why people get confused by it. I mean, when you think about Angela Merkel inviting in the Muslim hordes, why? Because of German guilt for the Holocaust. So think about this, folks. Because of German guilt for the racism of the Nazi times, for the tribalist racism of the Nazi times, they thought, well, here's what we'll do. We'll invite in all of these strangers to expiate our guilt. Ironically, they invite people who share the views of the Nazis about Jews or about the West. So there's tremendous irony. And, the Bible says we're supposed to be wise as serpents and innocent of doves. The wise as serpents part, this is complicated stuff. When we're talking about evil, when we're talking about a southern border that's just been wide open. So Josh, we're at a very strange time, I guess, is my way of summing it up, because it's not simple. We're not dealing with the Soviets.
No, you're not. And we're fundamentally not dealing in all respects with rational actors. Again, I think that there are many different types of policy disagreements where we can have a rational, sober conversation. I'm happy to have an amicable, policy-infused conversation with a liberal cohort when it comes to tax rates or tax credits or things of that nature there. But when you're talking about foreign policy on this level, when you're talking about what clearly appears to be a willful desire to actively undermine the United States' own national interests, our own integrity, our own borders, our own sovereignty, all of the above, it's very difficult to look at the other party and the other leaders and conclude anything other than you are dealing with evil and that our side therefore must win if we are to perpetuate this grand experiment in ordered liberty. And I have many criticisms of my own side. I have many criticisms of the leaders, of the movements, the figures involved there. But at a certain point, you kind of have to come home and conclude that there is only one path forward right now. And, certainly, Eric, I hope that Donald Trump does win this November.